Let's begin our exploration of plant families by looking at Showy Monocots. And formerly, this would have been the Liliaceae. Now it's like Liliaceae with quotes around it. And we'll see why in a moment. But first, let's take a look at the little iconography from the Peterson's Field Guide. It's so descriptive. It shows a six-pointed star, which, if carefully looked at, would be two sets of three sepals and three petals. But they look so much alike that you can hardly tell them apart, and sometimes they're just called tepals. Here's a picture of a lily, and yeah, you might say six petals, but nope, there's three sepals, three petals. You could really look very subtly and see that the sepals are kind of outside where the petals are, but that's a little challenging to detect. The feature is that they look alike, and they're sometimes called tepals, showy flowers typically. The the family in the old sense, and what we're kind of lumping together because they have a lot of features in common and are easy to recognize, are now in different plant families. So in this table here is a number of plant families that include genera that formerly and in our older manuals have been regarded as being in the lily family. For example, trilliums in the Trilliaceae, and for example, asparagus in the Asparagaceae, and so on. But what's still in the lily family? Well, lily has to be, and trout lilies in the genus Erythronium, and a few other things. So we have a number of plant families that we're lumping together for convenience and tradition. So let's see what they have in common. They are monocots. They have their flower parts are in threes, and again, this is a lily, and it's got three sepals and three petals that look so much alike you can barely distinguish them, and so they're sometimes called tepals. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stamens, and a pistil consisting of a syncarpous gynoecium of three carpels, typically maturing into a capsule. Here's a picture of a plant called bellwort. The flowers are descending, so I guess that's why it's called bellwort, like a bell. And I like these flowers because they look so much like leaves. The sense that the petals are modified leaves really comes home with this particular plant. And it's in the genus Uvularia. Here's a series of photos of that plant, showing on the left the flowers intact with the 6 tepals, and then in the middle a flower with several of the tepals removed so that you can see most of the 6 stamens, and then on the right several of the stamens are removed because they were blocking the view of the pistil, and on the right you can see the pistil with its 3-branch stigma, indicative of the syncarpous gynoecium consisting of 3 carpels. A very typical member of the lily family, and a very typical monocot. And look how the leaves are narrow and have parallel veins. Here we have Erythronium, or trout lily. This is one of the members of the former lily family that are actually currently still in the lily family. And look at the narrow leaves with what you could make out to be parallel veins, and 3 sepals and 3 petals that look virtually identical. Trout lily. Here's trout lily in fruit, or just beginning to be in fruit. This picture shows the corolla withered and sort of just barely hanging on while the ovary matures into the fruit. This is a plant called Trillium. Trillium, which is no longer in the lily family, but close, is one of the few of these showy monocots that doesn't have so-called tepals. The sepals are green and leaf-like, and the petals are expanded and colorful, so it looks a little more typical. 3 sepals, 3 petals, 6 stamens, and a syncarpous gynoecium. These leaves are kind of broad and look almost net-veined, but those characteristics are flexible. This is another picture of trout lily. This is the yellow form of, the yellow species. We have 2 common species in Ohio: the yellow trout lily, Erythronium americanum, and a white one called Erythronium albidum. Daylily is the genus Hemerocallis. It's kind of weedy. What we're trying to do when we show you representatives of these families is have some examples of ones that are native wildflowers, and also a few examples where the family includes them, which most of the time they do, some weeds. And the daylily is something of a weed. It's escaped along roadsides and sometimes in prairies. But what I'd like to draw your attention to is the Liliaceae, in quotes. It's in a different family now, but the Showy Monocot features of having 3 sepals and 3 petals that look alike, so they can be called tepals. These have long, narrow leaves with parallel veins, 6 stamens, and it's pretty typical Showy Monocot. Onions are formerly in the lily family, and these species have their flowers in a kind of an inflorescence that's called an umbel. Many flowers attached at one point at the top of the flowering stalk, and the individual flowers, as you can see, typical Showy Monocot, former Liliaceae, 3 sepals, 3 petals, looking a lot alike, so you call them tepals. Nodding wild onion, Allium cernuum. Asparagus, formerly a member of the Liliaceae, and it's got the features, 3 sepals and 3 petals, and boy, they look a lot alike. And this is not a native to our area. It's escaped a little bit along roadsides. Mostly it's a garden plant. A lovely native wildflower, formerly in the Liliaceae, is called wild hyacinth. It's not related closely to the garden plant that's called the hyacinth, but the wild part means that it could be thought of as reminiscent of it. This is a lovely spring wildflower that can form pretty vast swaths, like shown here in this woodland in Marion County. It's called Camassia scylloides, and the inflorescence is what's called a raceme. It's an elongate inflorescence with flowers that are individually stalked. And here we see the typical Liliaceae, in quotes. It's in a different family now, but the typical Showy Monocot that used to be Liliaceae, and some of which still are, 3 sepals and 3 petals that look so much alike that they could be called tepals, 6 stamens, and a gynoecium with nice superior ovary. You can see some lines on the ovary suggestive of the fact that it has a syncarpous gynoecium consisting of 3 carpels. Here's a plant called Solomon's seal. The picture shows a nice monocot trait, the parallel veins on these sort of narrow-ish leaves. The inflorescence here is an axillary group of 2, and once again, 3 sepals and 3 petals that look so much alike you can't distinguish them. And if you tucked in there and looked, I'm sure you'd see 6 stamens, and you'd see in syncarpous gynoecium of 3 carpels. Solomon's seal. Here's Solomon's seal, a different species, I think, in fruit, showing the fruits, which I believe are berries. Solomon's seal, formerly a member of the lily family. Coming up next, the mustards.